everybody. Welcome back to Author Eke. Today I have Steve Hartov, and he has written a couple great books. I'm actually reading this one, Last of the Seven. And when I got to Handehoch, which is raise your hands in German, I'm like, oh, no, I need to use that a little bit. So it's a very good book, World War II, very poignant. And then The Soul of a Thief, another one here. First, I got to do this one, then I got to do this one. Well, Stephen, it's great having you, and introduce your folks to the Author Eke crowd.
Hey, it's great to be here, Travis. I really appreciate you having me on. I've seen a lot of these podcasts, and we all seem to run in the same circles, all the veteran writers. As a matter of fact, I do some talks in some places, and I'm working on a presentation about warrior authors. And when you look back, Travis, in literary history, you'd be amazed. I mean, you know this, but you'd be amazed at how many famous authors were veterans and
Yeah.
wrote a lot about their services and stuff like that. At any rate, I'm one of those guys. You're one of those guys. I started military service. First time when I was 19, I joined the U.S. Merchant Marine. I quit college. I joined the U.S. Merchant Marine.
Wow. My uncle was a merchant marine in World War II.
What's that?
My uncle was a merchant marine in World War II.
Yeah, and you know what? People don't realize the stuff those guys went through. They got torpedoed and sunk, and they went through hell.
Yes.
As a matter of fact, the ship that I served on had been an oiler refueler from 1942. And
wow.
the only thing that was different about it when I got on it was they took the deck guns off. So
other than that, they were helpless. I mean, they were, they did all the convoys, and people don't realize that they just weren't sailors, Navy sailors out there. A lot of them are the merchant marines that proudly served, and probably some of the unsung heroes.
Yeah, they were full-on combatants, and it was only recently that they started to get veterans benefits from World War II.
Oh, wow.
They were considered civilians.
Huh.
But they were not
their own academy.
They had their own academy, which I did not go to. I was one of those guys who just, somebody sent me down to the Union Hall. Next thing you knew, I was on
off the deck.
Yeah, exactly. And we were carrying JP5 jet fuel all over the world. I didn't know what I was doing. I thought, oh, this will be fun. And then I got on board, and they said, oh yeah, no smoking on this ship.
So I was doing some work for a company in Kentucky, and out by Bowling Green, but it's like 20 miles outside of Bowling Green. And I get there, they go, "You got any water?" I go, "No." Do you have a lighter? I go, "No." So I go out there, and so I'm curious. I said, "So why are they asking if I have lighter and water?" They said, "Well, we make aluminum cans here, and water and the production of aluminum cans and lighters or fuel to ignite, they don't go well." And I would notice I went outside, and this place was like in a valley.
Really?
So if it did go off, it would go up. I'm like, you're not paying me enough to come out here and teach your class.
I said the same thing on that ship. Although, I was on that. It wasn't a long tour. It was 6 months, but kid goes to sea sort of thing.
Right.
Came back. I finished college, and then after that, because my family's half Israeli, I went over and joined the paratroopers.
Oh, wow.
And it was like American kid in the Foreign Legion,
Really?
Oh, yeah. It was, I didn't know a thing. I just...
But they embraced you, I assume. I mean...
Yeah, they embraced me. They thought I was crazy, but they embraced me, And I was in that for a good few years. I did some special operations stuff like you did, some scout stuff. And then I came back here, and when I was too old to join anything else, I joined the New York Guard. And I just retired 2 years ago as a major from the New York Guard.
Oh, wow. Good for you.
And I served in an Air Force base near here. I'm in Jersey. I served in an Air Force base called Stewart up in New York.
Yep. No words.
So that's my military background. The other stuff is all writing stuff, which I started when I was
quite the military background. You went from on the ocean to in the air,
right,
and then on the ground.
Yeah, exactly.
So you almost got what are the 4 elements? You're just missing fire. Well, no, never mind. You were on a JP-5
Right.
tanker. You had fire.
I'm missing the Space Force element. That's what I'm missing.
Exactly.
Yeah,
So
I'm
how'd you
too
get
old
into
now.
writing? What provoked you?
When I was a kid, my mother thrust literature upon me very young. I mean, she
Mhm.
wasn't pushing it on me. I was an avid reader. Remember the Hardy Boys?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, well, I read them all, and then I was fresh out of material, and she said,
Mhm.
"Oh, well, I'll give you an adult book," and she gave me Alistair MacLean's *The Guns of Navarone*.
Oh, that's a great movie.
It's a great movie and a great book, and then
Yes.
that was it. Then I was like 10 years old and
Mhm.
reading, Joseph Heller and Leon Uris and Hemingway. I read every word Hemingway ever wrote, and so I realized now that most of the
Mhm.
people that I read and admire were veterans or aviators. Um, there's a great book by Beryl Markham, a female aviator from the early like 20s and 30s,
Mhm.
1920s and 30s, called West with the Night.
Huh.
I was reading adventure stuff.
Right. A lot of people don't know that Ernest Hemingway served in World War I as a stretcher bearer in Italy,
Absolutely.
which is pretty fascinating. We had, I think, a battalion working in the Alps in Italy back in World War One, later part of 1918. Before I think maybe the summer 1918. But yeah, it's interesting. And they weren't called medics back then; they were called stretcher bearers.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he did that. He drove an ambulance. He was
Yep.
wounded in the Italian campaigns.
Yep.
Um, yeah, a lot of these guys
Yeah.
served in one way or another. F. Scott Fitzgerald served, but he was never deployed.
Hmm.
But a lot of the big World War II writers. Who else? Joseph Heller, Catch 22. All these guys.
Yeah.
Kurt Vonnegut, Slaughterhouse
Oh yeah, that's right.
Five. Yeah,
Yeah.
Kurt Vonnegut, as a matter of fact, was a POW, um, imprisoned in a German POW facility in Dresden when the Allies bombed Dresden.
Oh man, that was a firebombing too. They disintegrated that town.
That's right, and he
Yeah.
was there, and that's what spurred him to write Slaughterhouse Five. Anyway, I mean, I'm going off on
Well,
all
that's
these other
just like
guys.
that's like the old actors and actors. They were World War II veterans. A lot of Jimmy Stewart, right? Flew
Absolutely.
B-17s. Ronald Reagan, not that he fought, but he did propaganda films, and a lot of these folks were patriotic
Oh,
at the
Clark
time.
Gable forced his way onto a bomber. He was not
Yeah,
supposed to do that, and
yeah.
he would like sneak his way onto a bombing mission.
Charles
I mean, these.
Bronson.
Oh,
I
Charles
mean,
Bronson.
Audie Murphy. I mean, it's crazy when you look at all this
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah. We still see some of that now, but not a lot.
No, no. But there
So
there is a tremendous amount of authors.
tell me about your 1 in 4 book. I know you're writing.
Yeah.
You've got a book coming out, historical fiction about World War I. How did you research that?
So I did. First thing I read a book. This one here, First World War. It's a great book.
Yes. Yeah.
So I used that a lot. And I bought a lot of material, went to the library, and then I read the history of the First Infantry Division. It's
Wow.
was 1924. It was written, and it goes, it's about 500 pages, and it's chronologically. So what I did, I kind of took that as the timeline for the unknown soldier that his diary that I was writing.
The first division, the first infantry division is the Big Red One.
Yes, and before World War One, there weren't divisions. It was the first expeditionary
Oh
force,
yes.
and then in World War One, they created the divisions, which you had the first, the third, the second, the seventh, the ninth,
Right.
and a lot of them out of the the National Guard uh, elements, and then when I do some research, and I also had a gentleman, a historian out of SMU, that I would send things to, say, is this accurate? And no, you
Yes.
need to change, or this is accurate. Because what I didn't know, they instituted the draft in 1917, and it was really It didn't go over very well. Then the United States started a marketing campaign of Uncle Sam Wants You, those posters.
Yes,
That if you notice those posters, wherever you walked, Uncle Sam was watching you.
I didn't
His
notice that.
eyes would trail you. It's amazing. And that's started that. And a lot of the trench coat came out of World War I by the British.
Right.
So a lot of the things came out of there. But I did just a lot of research on, I didn't read any letters from veterans or none of their diaries. I didn't want to put any of that in there. It was all what I was reading and then what I wanted to explain or how I wanted to feel in the book.
So did you write that book in first person, like you're writing a diary?
I did. I wrote it in first person and third person. What it is uh, a French girl. First, it talks about how the soldier was selected from the Tomb of the Unknown for the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. It goes through
Right.
that whole process, which is historically correct. Then it goes into a French girl sees a 9 infantry soldiers, Americans, you tell by the uniform, advancing across barren no man's land, and they get in an ambush, artillery, machine gun fire. She sees this one soldier run and try to protect other soldiers, falling on them and everything. And the artillery comes in. She can't take it anymore. She goes behind her window and she's screaming, "Stop! Stop! Stop!" Eventually stops. She looks up and decimated. So she wants to go out there and help because she knows a little bit about first aid. So she runs down there and it's carnage like she had never seen. So she sits there and prays for the souls.
Right.
And so she goes around, and that one soldier that was heroic and trying to save his soldiers, his hand was out and his hand was on a diary. And all the soldiers in World War I were given diaries to write their experience because it helps to uh, to alleviate the pressure of combat, to help
I
them.
didn't know that.
Yeah. And so his hand was on this Bible, and she hears something, is pick me up, and not in a angry voice, or it's like an angel. So she picks up the diary, puts it in her pocket, tries. She can't help any of them. Runs back home and waits for a U.S. patrol to come by because she wants to tell them what happened. So she sees a patrol, stops a patrol. The lieutenant can't speak French, but it's a guy named Sergeant Younger can. And by coincidence, Sergeant Younger is the one who selected out of the 4 caskets, one of 4, to go into the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier.
I
So I
gotcha.
put him in there, and he actually went with 2 other soldiers to try to identify the soldiers. They could identify all of them but one. The one that had the Bible or the diary.
Right.
So they mark all the graves. They take the identification tags, leave one with the soldier, take one, and says, "This I can't. This identified." Days later, the mortuary service goes out, buries him, and puts him in an unknown grave. Then he's transported to another grave, one of 4 in France. Take years later, Germany invades. The war's over. She goes to Paris. Germany invades France. She has the Bible and the diary with her. She takes it because she can't read English, but she wants to tell the story. She works in a cafe. She becomes part of the French resistance. They're looking for her. She takes the diary, cuts the middle out, or the Bible, takes the diary, places it inside, locks it, puts it in the oldest bookstore in Paris, leaves Paris. She wants to return to take the book. She's killed helping a pilot who parachuted out of a P-38.
Wow.
So the diary, the Bible, sits in this bookstore for 80, almost 100 years.
Wow.
Until present day, a son and a father who are estranged take a trip to Bonn. The son feels something in this bookstore, pulls the Bible out, and it's locked. He says, I can't read French. It's a Bible. Puts it back, whatever, it's locked. Starts to leave, and his hair gets just goes on, and he just feels this calming sensation. He takes the Bible, takes Dad, said, "Dad, I want to buy a Bible." Dad like, "Come on." "Oh, okay, Dad, never mind." Sort of write that into the relationship is very confrontational. He said, "Okay, you know what?" And then the first part of that binding is his dad is able to pick the lock in on the Bible. And his dad's retired NCO, 20-year, Cav Scout. Got some personal baggage of his own, PTSD, and it goes through this whole relationship. But what they do is they take that Bible or that diary and then read the day-to-day exploits of the soldier and retrace his footsteps.
Oh, interesting.
And it finally leads them back to surmising that the son can't feel him buried in the cemetery because he can see the soldier in his dreams, all but his face. And nowhere in the diary is his name, where he's from, no names of really any of the soldiers, just nicknames. And they surmise maybe he's buried in Arlington National Cemetery. So they go there, and they go to the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, and they leave the Bible and the diary there because the book premises that diary is of that soldier.
Gotcha.
And if you think, who would you want? What kind of soldier would be in the tomb? It's spiritual, a leader, heroic,
right,
cares for his men,
right,
loving family, and that's this whole story. It's very emotional, even for me when I read it still, or I talk about it. It's an interesting story.
I think it sounds great, and it sort of falls in line with my. I have sort of a motto that's up on my website, and I use this photograph from World War II of this Sicilian elderly woman kissing a young GI in 1943.
Mm-hmm.
And my motto is, I don't write war stories, I write stories about people that happen to take place during wartime. And that's sort of the same thing. It's really not about, the tanks and the guns, and it's about the people.
Yes. The evolution
and what's interesting about what you just told me is that my first book in my World War II series is also a diary.
Ah, interesting.
It's a diary of a 19-year-old Austrian kid. And that leads to the second book, but it's also in diary form. He's an old man now, writing in the last days of his life about what happened to him during World War II. So, and that's the only book I've ever written that way.
It's tough because I put the diary, then I interjected the son and father interactions.
That's hard.
Because he would read the book and he'd dream about it. His dad was like, you're having a nightmare, but then all this emotions come out from his dad and then him, and so it starts read the diary, then it'll break and talk about them two would talk,
right,
and then it go back and talking about the diary and how to weave all that in there. So it's interesting. When I was starting my third book in my Team Texarkana series, and I had this idea. I ran it by my son. He goes, "Dad," he goes, my son's a veteran, just got out of the Army 3 years ago, and he goes, "Dad, instead of the premise, but have it as a father and son who are trying to build back a relationship."
So he came up with that idea?
He did.
Wow, good for him.
He did. And so I put that in there because the initial one was they find just in a bookstore, but how do you want to put the personal relationship now, and how can the past, reading about the past, help forge the present and the future?
Yeah, really interesting. Really interesting.
In relationships.
My older son is a veteran as well, and served in the same battalion as me. Paratrooper.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. 40 years apart.
Huh?
40 years apart.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Yeah, my son was a military intelligence guy. He a little smarter than I am. He told me, Dad, when he joined, go, "Dad, I want to be a Cav Scout." And I go, "No, you don't." Even though I loved it. Trust me, I loved it.
I said the
but I
same
wanted
thing
to
to my
do
son.
something
He
where
said, I
when we
want to
got
be a
out,
paratrooper.
we could do it.
My son said, I want to be a paratrooper. I said, no, you don't. He said, yes, I do. And he went ahead and did it anyway.
Sometimes you just can't talk about stuff. That's great.
Right.
So tell me about the soul of a thief. I mean, you went from war to, to another book.
Yeah,
So how did you
I've
do
written
that?
my career started off. I was the first things I wrote were a bunch of espionage novels. Then I wrote some nonfiction. I wrote the book with Mike Durant in the Company of Heroes about the Black
Uh-huh.
Hawk Down. He's
Oh,
the
wow.
pilot. Mike's the pilot who was shot down in Black Hawk Down and captured.
Mhm.
So he and I wrote that
That makes
together.
me so mad. I mean, I was in the army then. It makes me so mad.
Oh, I
That
know. Yeah.
burning mad. Ugh, okay.
Well, it made all of them mad, but that book was that's still a very popular book. And then I wrote a
Yes.
book about the Night Stalkers, about the 160th. Then I went back and I was in a magazine guy for a while, and then I started writing this World War II fiction. And that first book, The Soul of a Thief, is about a kid who's he's a half Christian and half Jewish, and he's from
Mhm.
Austria, and he gets recruited, pulled into the German army to serve for a German SS colonel in France.
Ah,
And the two of them fall in love with the same French girl. And that's the whole premise of that book, but it's much deeper than that.
right.
And that
Oh,
was
yeah.
actually based on a great uncle of mine who did that. He was a 19-year-old kid. He was a half breed, sort of
Mhm.
half Christian, half Jewish.
Yep.
And to hide from the Nazis, he joined the Luftwaffe.
Ah,
He he actually joined the German Air Force because he thought hide in plain sight.
of course. That's
And
amazing.
they figured it out and they sent him to a concentration camp, which he survived. And he
Oh,
was a
they found
jolly
out?
guy. What's that?
They found out that he was
They
Jewish?
found out he wasn't circumcised, so that they couldn't tell by that. Otherwise, they would have found out
Yeah,
in the
of course.
first shower. But his Polish wife, young Polish wife, got scared that they would find out and do something to her, so she turned him in.
Well,
Um, that was the end of the marriage and the end of his service in the Luftwaffe.
yeah. I would think maybe the marriage first.
Yeah, I think so too. Anyway, so that was a family story that always stuck in my mind, and I turned that into this story.
Excellent.
Um,
What do you like writing best? What's your
Fiction.
most fulfilling? What kind of genre do you really feel, fulfilled when you write?
Fiction is the most fun for me. I've written a lot of nonfiction. I've ghosted a lot of books, fiction and nonfiction. Fiction is always more fun for me. I travel a lot. Like I try to only write about places I've been to.
Mm-hmm.
So, like the second book, The Last of the Seven, takes place in North Africa, Sicily, Germany, and I've been to all those places.
Oh, wow.
So have you. I mean, so it's
Mhm.
it's much more fun and easier to write about someplace you've actually been to and done things at.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I like fiction.
I'm tempted, and I spent uh, probably 5 years total, not every day, on the East-West German border. I did border patrols. I was operations sergeant of a border camp for a while, 3-7 Cav, and it's like, man, I would like to write a fiction about the border, the Iron Curtain. I mean, I got a
Yeah,
piece of it, the
absolutely.
Iron Curtain, and try to wrap that into a story. Uh, of My wife, I mean, she's from a town that was 11 kilometers from the border uh, in Germany. So yeah, it's just that's something I put in the back of my mind. Maybe want to write later on, but I have another idea for a World War I book that I'm doing.
So
Gonna start.
you haven't yet written about being a 19 Delta.
No.
And why haven't you? I that's funny because people always ask me how come I haven't written a novel about being in the IDF as a young paratrooper back in the
Yeah.
70s, and I seem to be able to write about everything else but that. It's
Yes.
interesting, right?
Yes. I don't know. I mean, because I mean, I did it for 20 years. 17 years old, I quit high school and joined the army.
Yeah.
Uh, so I could write about. I know all things have changed over the years, but that time period, I know all of it. I mean, I walked that thing up and down. I don't know. I don't know. That's a good question. That's a good. I don't know.
I think sometimes it's the hardest thing to write about is your own very personal stuff. And,
Right.
you take it, what I do is I take it and I put it into a novel and somebody else is doing it. And
Yes.
then it's much easier to write about it that way than doing it from your own sort of perspective, point of view, first person. I couldn't do that.
Yeah. A lot of people, are so with these. Well, are you in the book, or who's it? How do you base your characters? And I think, well, a piece of the author is in every book, a little in
And every
every
character.
character.
Correct.
Whether it's a female author writing about a male, or a male writing about a female, or there's
Right.
something or a family member, or something that is, everybody has a quirky, relative, that you want to put in there somewhere, somehow,
Yes.
and you want to relate that back. And I put a lot so far in every one of my books, where my father's from, a little town in Arkansas called Bald Knob, Arkansas. Used to be the
Yeah.
strawberry capital of the world. And as my dad was growing up during the Depression and after the Depression, they picked strawberries and cotton. That's how this family survived.
Yeah.
So I always find a way to sneak it in the book. And this one I snuck in the book kind of, prominently. But I snuck it in the book. I grew up when we go on vacation. My dad was in the Air Force. So we go there on vacation, see my grandma. And I remember, they didn't have any money. And we were on the other side of the tracks. And so we said, "Oh, Grandma, can we have an ice cream or RC cola or moon pie or something?" She goes, "Yeah, go up to, go to the grocery store up there, just a little store, maybe a quarter mile up the road, maybe not even that. Go up there. We all have ice creams and everything." And they look at us, "You're Pauline's grandkids, aren't you?" I go, "Yeah." They go, "Go ahead. I'll put it on her tab." Never paid for
Really?
nothing. Now, I'm sure my grandma did, but we never did.
Yeah.
Churning ice cream on the porch. That's that kind of, things that I remember during my time, spent with her and my other, whatever, how many cousins. A lot. That's why I kind of put it in the book sometimes.
I do that.
Okay.
The whole center part of this novel, The Last of the Seven, features my actual uncle who was a combat surgeon at the Battle of the Bulge.
Oh,
Now
wow.
he passed 30 years ago, but he got the Bronze Star. He was a very tough guy. He looked like James Coburn, and I always wanted to write about him because he was such a strange, wonderful character. He was a tough country type doctor from Brooklyn, New York. He had that accent. He smoked a cigar. And I just finally got the opportunity to sort of honor him.
Right.
And so I made him the commander of a field hospital in my book. And
Oh,
that way
nice.
I brought him back to life. I'll tell you something interesting. Just last week, I get an email from some older fella up in Maine,
Mm-hmm.
who sends me an email through my author site and says, "Mr. Hartov, I was reading your latest novel. And when I came across Captain Lefkowitz, I realized that he had been my family doctor in Brooklyn when I was a kid, and it's got to be the same guy."
You're kidding.
Yeah, and he said, "And I spent a lot of my childhood around your uncle and his wife and his sons."
That's
Out of
amazing.
nowhere.
That's amazing.
Isn't that wild?
That is wild. It's a small world. I run into people all the time at the airport. I'm like, how many
Right?
people are on the planet, right? Yeah, crazy.
I know, it's
So,
cool.
so how many books have you written total?
About 20.
Okay.
Half of them under my own name and half of them as a ghost or, with somebody else.
Mhm.
And I wrote a book about Afghanistan with a photographer. We wrote that together, Robert Cunningham. That's a big photography book. It's like a coffee table book. We wanted to
Okay.
sort of honor our service people, and we were both in Afghanistan. So that's
That's,
another favorite project of mine. And, about 20.
dang, that's a lot. That's a lot.
It's
So,
not a lot compared to some of
oh, I
these
know some of
writers
these
out
companies got
there.
like 80 books on them. Like,
Yeah, I know. Yeah, but then you get J.D. Salinger, who only ever wrote one book, but it was one of the biggest books ever. So you never, you know.
I look at Dan Brown. He wrote what, 4, 5 books? I
Yeah,
don't know if he's even writing anymore.
some of these guys or some of these gals don't. You know, it isn't volume. It's like they'll take. I take a long time to write a book. It takes me like 2 3 years to write a book. So I'll
Mhm.
never be one of those people who churns them out. You know.
I'm pretty quick, but the research takes a while, right? Because you
Yes,
want
it
to
does.
when I look at a book, I go, okay. I always equate it to a pie, and you cut a pie in 3 pieces. First, you write the book, research, write everything. Then you proof it. That's another piece, and then the other piece, which may be bigger, is the marketing aspect of it.
Oh yeah.
How do you got to build a brand? Where do if you have a finite amount of money, where do you put those dollars to get the best bang for the buck? To be able to get it out there. That's what I find the hardest is the marketing aspect of it.
It's very tough, and I'm not good at it, which is why I hired Liz Malone to do it for me, and she's amazing. And
Mm,
you know, my publicist Liz, she does graphics, she does this, she does that, she does ads for me, and you know, you have a finite amount that you're going to invest in something like
yep.
that. I think that probably the best way to get your writing known, and this came to me late in life, is in face to face encounters with small groups of readers, and you go to a
Yep.
signing and you have your copies that they can buy. And
Yep.
it's like your background. I mean, you can go into a group of people, local people, and talk about your military background for an hour without a problem, and then
Yep.
they'll buy your books. And okay,
Right.
sometimes you're selling 5, sometimes you're selling 50, but I think that's really the old fashioned way that works. I really do.
Yeah, I do book signings. They have a program. I live in Texas, and I think they have Texas, Ohio, Michigan. There's a few places, but I do book signings in Kroger. Uh, or go on a weekend, have a table.
Right.
They just scan it at the checkout. I don't have to worry about it.
Yep.
Go through and I meet a lot of folks. Uh, and the military definitely helps out because it definitely stirs the conversation because a lot of people either were they or relative somebody somehow was in the military. Uh,
Yes.
and so that works out pretty well. But I like that. I do the other different signings I did the podcast. I started the podcast because I had no idea what I was doing after my first book. So I said, what a better way is to talk to people that have done it. And then as by talking to them, I learn, but then I get back to the community, which I found that the author community is amazing because everybody's willing to help everybody else.
Yes.
It's amazing. I mean, no, you're like, I'm not going after your readers. They're not going to read one book a year. People are going to read multiple books a year.
Absolutely. This is like when you had Jeff Circle on, who's an
Mhm.
awesome guy. And
He's an interesting guy.
he's an interesting guy. He did a lot of stuff downrange.
Yep.
And
Yep.
somebody pointed out to me and said, you should look at Travis's author Eke because Jeff Circle came on there, Steve, and held up your book.
Yeah.
And he did. And so that's the kind of thing that we all do for each other without being competitive about it
Yeah.
or I'm not going to help this guy. So because you're right, people, if they read in our genre, they're going to read everybody.
Yeah. They're and if they read mine, they're going to say, well, what's something like it? Oh, they can read yours.
Right,
Or
exactly.
read yours, read mine. It's a very symbiotic relationship in the author community that I found. And no matter, if you're a New York bestseller or, have sold 10 books, but there's always somebody always has a nugget of information that somebody can glean and then help them to be a better author. And a book is a business. Each book is a business, right?
Yes.
You got to have your marketing plan. I've started a couple companies. You've got to have the business plan. You've got to have the financials. You need what's your goal? How you can do it?
Right.
And then without a plan, it's a dream, right? That's all. That's all you have. Have a
Absolutely.
plan and work toward revise a plan. They always talk about in the military when let's say I get an operations order, and it's always like, okay, I as a platoon sergeant, I'm going to take 1/3 of the total time that I have, and I'm going to give you 2/3 to do what you've got to do to the plan.
Right.
You're going to take 1/3 of those 2/3, so everybody gets the same amount of time to be able to refine that. And I think if you have, ability to think like that, and then revise as you go, and spend an hour a day marketing or writing or talking to other authors, do something productive in your craft, I guess.
Yeah, I totally agree. And my very first literary agent told me it was going to be a long haul and that it was like building a pyramid. It's going to take a long time until you get to the top of that pyramid, and you just keep on.
And we still don't know how they built it.
Right. Nobody knows.
Nobody knows, but somehow they built it.
Yeah, I
they're
can't
beautiful.
figure that out.
It's
That's another
Yeah.
story.
That's amazing. So what's on the horizon?
Well, I'm working on the third part of this World War II series, which goes from Normandy all the way to the liberation, of Germany and stuff. And that's a big book, and I'm going to be in France working on that, and Belgium, and so that's going to take me a couple of years. And then I'm releasing a short story collection this year, sort of noir stuff that I also like to write, mystery, old-fashioned gumshoe stuff. And I'm working on a leadership book with another Army veteran friend of mine, and I think that's enough for the next couple of years.
Excellent.
Yeah.
I got a review back from a vet, and he goes from the 104. He goes, this book needs to be in everybody's professional reading list in the military.
Wow.
And I didn't write it as a leadership book. I just wrote it as an NCO.
Wow.
I'm like, all right, but yeah, I didn't write it like I'm going to write a leadership book, right? You take care of your men, right? You go visit them in the hospital, or you pull guard duty. You're the last to eat. You take care of your soldiers, but then they take care of you. That's kind of
Well, I've had books in the on Army bases, in the bookstores and the post exchanges and stuff like that, and there are ways to get your books in there.
Mm-hmm.
You've got to sort of flack it with somebody who runs AFES or whatever, but they can get if you've got it in hard copy, if it's produced in hardcover or paperback. And once I discovered that once a book is in that system, if it's considered sort of a leadership book, they'll keep on buying them, and they just keep on buying them. I was in Bagram in Afghanistan and walked into their AFES, and two of my books were in there because
that's awesome.
the Command and General Staff College had recommended them. So,
I miss the Stars and Stripes bookstores. I used to love those in Germany.
Yeah.
Love it. Well, that's excellent. So what do you do in your free time, or do you have any?
I'm doing that free time. I don't have a lot of free time nowadays. You know what's strange, and I'm sure you realize this too, I only retired from the military 2 years ago, and that was all my free time.
Yeah.
That was my warrior weekends and staff meetings every week, and that was 17 years up at Stewart, up to that air base on the Army side.
Right.
And so now I'm sometimes sitting around going, at the end of a workday going, oh, I don't have to do, warnos or ops orders.
No OERs to write.
Yeah, no AARs, which I kind of miss. And, we do a lot of outdoor stuff and hiking and a lot of travel. I do a lot of travel as an author.
Right.
I'm on sort of a circuit. And so, a couple of times a month I have to travel somewhere, fly somewhere, and talk about the books, which is good. It's great. And we own a very old 1926 house in New Jersey that always needs attention.
Oh, wow.
So,
can you do anything to it on the facade, or does it have to go through the Historical Society or something?
It doesn't have to go through the Historical Society. It just has to go through my wallet.
Which is you probably wish there was a historical society.
Yes, I do. I do. I
We need to
am the
start one.
historic.
We need to
I am
start
the
one.
historical society.
Well, Stephen, it's been a pleasure talking to you today, and I had a great time, and I wish you much success. And I'm going to finish reading this, and I'm going to put the review out on it because so far I like it.
I appreciate it, and thanks so much for having me, Travis. I appreciate it too. And I will when does one of four come out?
You can get it pre-ordered now on ebook and off my website. It's coming out May the 1st.
Very good. Well, I'm going to be ordering a hard copy and get a signature off you.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Take care.
See you guys. Thanks for your service. All of it.
You too. You too.
All right, hold on a second. All right, bye.